This is Uncouth Tangents. I'm your host, B.
And I'm your host, Dove.
And welcome to the show.
If it sucks, it goes into the bin.
So you're going to go see it?
Dare you not respond? Okay. No. I'm not going to spend money on a ticket to see a remake of a horrible 80's film. No. You know what? As much as Pennywise traumatized me as a child, it was a shitty movie.
Yeah, and that's kind of my thinking too. Like, I wasn't initially going to watch it because I thought everything about it looked very schlocky and not good. But then I thought about it, and it goes against my principle, which is we shouldn't remake good movies. We should remake bad movies because...
But they did.
Yeah.
Because it was bad.
Yeah, and that's why I'm like, maybe I should watch it because they're doing the thing I want movie studios to do, because there's so many bad movies out there that have like really good concepts behind them, but they fumbled on it so hard that if they were to remake it and just make it a better movie, it actually might be a box office hit. This one, I don't think, because the premise of it wasn't that great to begin with. It's essentially just Stand By Me with an alien that's terrorizing them.
Yeah, that was the 80's. That sums up the 80's.
Yeah.
Like, everything was Stand By Me.
Well, E.T. wasn't necessarily terrorizing the kids.
That was such a great film.
E.T.?
Yeah.
You know, it came out within the same time frame as The Thing.
Did it?
Yeah, and that's why The Thing bombed, because E.T. came out first, and everybody was like, no, aliens are cute and lovable. We can't handle an alien that's hideous and attacking people.
Yeah.
It has a really dark ending.
Yeah, of course I saw that.
Yeah.
It was an 80's horror film, and my dad showed me all of them. So
that
was actually no, The Thing. So that was actually one of his favorite films to show me. I'm like, oh, look, you're 7. Watch this movie. I'm like, oh god.
Were you ever terrified to like visit like a snowy area, or like when it snowed, did you get scared?
No.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't traumatizing to that degree. I mean, snow in itself was traumatizing because it brought the ice, but
winter is coming.
Yeah, but that was a different thing. So with it, I'll eventually watch it, but I'm not going to go to the theater to see it unless we plan something where, everybody's drunk and
well, a while ago
we go out and see this film.
Everybody was in the office was kind of discussing like, yeah, we should all go see it as like a group because everybody's hyped on this trailer.
I do remember watching the trailer. Mm-hmm. I don't remember being hyped on it.
I think it was just you and me that were like, I don't think so.
Well, I hate clowns, and so I wasn't into it for that kind of thing. But then you ripped on it for a different reason, not because you were traumatized as I am.
Oh, I was traumatized for a little while, but like
well you went at a different standpoint to where this character isn't scary because they've made it into a monster. Like it changed from the original thing that was scary back in the 80's to now this demonic being that's just using jump scares to terrify people.
What's that movie with the doll that comes to life? It's
Annabelle?
Yeah, Annabelle. I'm so glad you got that and
I
not
watch
Child's Play. Because that could have easily been Child's Play, but thank you for getting that.
That is so true. Yeah. I am telepathic today.
So Annabelle,
yes. Or Annabelle.
Annabelle.
Someone wants to be fucking fancy.
Is it? I don't know how they pronounce it in the movie. Either way, like it's something that's like so obviously like evil and trying to pass off as normal so it can do stealth scares. It doesn't make sense in my brain, so it's immediately hilarious anytime it does anything, because you're essentially just Jason, like Voorhees or Freddy Krueger.
But not just... even. I would definitely say that Child's Play was, the first one, was a lot scarier than Annabelle. Now, I could be kind of...
That's because it's an actual it's a serial killer inside a doll, which I don't know.
Well,
I don't understand. Does Chucky have human strength, or does he have doll strength?
They've made it to be kind of an in-between kind of thing, because he's not able to pick up an entire human body over his head, but he has drag bodies and wherever he wants them to be. So
he has the strength to also stab somebody.
So it isn't doll strength, but it isn't full-on 6-foot man strength.
Which makes that even stranger. Like, I don't know where his strength lies.
Well, it's in between. He has a physical strength of an average woman.
What does Annabelle have?
I
haven't seen the movie. Have you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I watch all things. So I'm cycling through to this particular film to see how she was killing people, and I honestly don't remember how she was killing people.
Does she kill people?
Like, I
in the
don't
movie?
remember I don't remember her having a knife. Now, there was another movie.
I just like to imagine it ruins people's lives in different ways. Like, it does their taxes all jacked up. And, like, adult things, like, oh, it messes up the plumbing. Oh, your shingles are coming off. Damn it!
If only. But it's just a demon inside of the doll. Man, now I have to look it up because I'm really upset that I'm bombing on remembering this. But there was another film about something similar as far as something inside of a doll. It was called The Boy. And what that one was about was a young woman goes to live with this family, a husband and wife, and for a babysitting job. And the babysitting job is to take care of their boy, which is this fucking doll. And so it's creepy. Whenever she looks one way and looks at it, tears coming out of its eye, or she'll look away and look back and it's not there, or the head is turned, and all types of shit is going on with this doll. It doesn't harm anybody, but it's creepy. But then it turns out, I'm about to tell the end of the film.
Spoiler alert.
Well, everyone's already seen this movie. If they have,
wait, when did it come out?
Anyway, I think it came out in theaters. Maybe it was
last
year?
week.
No. It wasn't even this year. It didn't come out this year. It's been out already. But anyway, it's a guy in the walls, a guy that's hiding in the walls. So that's creepy in a different way.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a different thing than Annabelle or Annabelle, where there's a demon inside the doll and it's encased or entrapped inside this doll body, versus Child's Play, where Charles Lee Ray fuses his spirit into the doll. So it's kind of different. And in my opinion, I would definitely say that Child's Play was a lot more terrifying. If it's a demon inside a ghost body, I mean, you just lock it up in the people's house. You lock it up. They locked it up in an area where they had all of these mythical artifacts that couldn't get out, that they didn't allow to get out because then it would terrorize people and shit like that. So they had a way to contain it. The guy in the walls, you stab him a couple times, he's dead. So that's a way to contain him. But then, like Chucky, he keeps coming back because it's a spirit that's going from one place to the next, or he's super hard to kill. So I would definitely be more terrified of Chucky than any of the other cases. Also, I guess things like the Babadook, I could see that as being terrifying. Of course, in the beginning, the child was more annoying than any monster could be.
I don't know why that is. In horror movies, it's almost a trope to have an annoying child.
The film Ouija, that was mainly a child that got possessed. Was this
approved by Mattel or Parker Brothers, whoever makes Ouija boards?
Well, the story of the Ouija board came out way before
Milton
Bradley ever made it into a game.
I don't know. I just thought it was
so that people
weird.
could be okay, like calling demons and shit.
I just think it's weird that like people allowed a toy company to communicate with the dead. Like that was an okay thing with families.
That's how.
Like, why would you gift that to somebody? Like,
that's how the
spirits
stuffer get into your soul and fuck shit up. You just make something into a toy.
By Milton Bradley.
Yeah. Like the Hellraiser box by Milton Bradley. So,
yeah.
That's how you ensure that you get to terrorize as many people as possible. So anyway.
So what me and my significant other do is we actually make these bingo boards. We create like a 5x5 grid, and we try and write down, if it's a horror movie we've never seen before, we try and write down horror tropes that we think are going to happen in the movie. Like,
oh, that's cool.
The prankster pretends to die. And like, if that happens in the movie, we cross it off and everything. We try to get like a whole bingo thing.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, so like next time you watch a horror movie, kind of create your own bingo sheet, like depending on like what kind of horror movie it is and what you expect to happen, and see how good you know horror movies from that.
Wow. so interesting,
Yeah.
especially because of how much horror movies have changed nowadays in the 2000s.
It's all over the place.
versus
It's so goofy.
The 80s, and I keep going back to the 80s because for me that
They were
was
a good time.
that was
a damn
prime
good
time for horror film. Versus today, where they're classifying a lot of things to be horror. For example, the film It Follows.
Oh, I love
say
that
film
film.
because I'm an old woman, but
I love that film though.
yeah. So the movie It Follows. It wasn't scary. I mean, it could have had scary elements in it because it was an incorporeal. Fuck. I'll try it again. Because it was an incorporeal, I think I still said it the same way, entity.
We got it.
Yeah. It was some shit that wasn't there.
Yeah. But it was more, I would think it sides on the thriller side of horror.
Okay, so you agree with me that, okay, so what you just said is that it sides with the thriller side of horror. So now what that says is that there are now these subcategories of horror.
I'd say it's more like a spectrum.
Yeah, which it didn't used to be. You know, it was like...
No, there was definitely like...
I don't think so. I don't know. Back in the day...
Like, what would you classify the thing as?
Horror. So I wouldn't classify it as a thriller horror. I wouldn't classify it as a slasher.
What about Alien, the first one?
I never classified that as a horror. That was a drama. Aliens are real. So that was real. For me, there wasn't any horror elements in it.
The thing popping out of the guy's stomach wasn't horrifying.
It's just a different being. It's nothing scary.
Oh my god. Okay.
But yeah,
but that's the same thing as the thing.
Yeah.
The thing is an alien.
Yeah, but that was okay. I see. Anyway. Okay. So that's horror versus.
But I'm just saying that there's
like back then when Jason first came out, it was just a horror film. Now today, when you look back on it, it's a slasher because we have all of these categories of horror films. Hellraiser was a horror film. Even though it was shitty, it was a horror film. So, but now today there's all of these different categories, and also not only that, they've changed the way that horror films are. Like they have such a track record now outside of foreign films where most of these films are no longer scary. So I don't know if that's just me being used to horror films or if Cabin in the Woods is just this hilarious film now. Like it's supposed to be a horror film, but it's so much into the genre of comedy that you can't really say this is a horror film just because people are screaming and running from something. Like, is that really what makes a horror film, running and screaming, or should it have these certain elements in it?
What about something like Shaun of the Dead?
I would not classify that as horror. For me, it's comedy. It has horror elements in it. You're taking something that comes from horror, zombies, but now you're putting it into a different genre. It's meant to be laughed at. So what is that classified as? It can't be classified as a horror film. It has to be classified as a comedy. Or is there a weird mashup of it's a horror comedy?
This is what I mean by that horror is more of a spectrum in the sense that there's not specific categories. There's just things that kind of are classified as horror but have kind of these elements. Or this is something that's supposed to be grotesque or whatever, and it's just classified as horror. Because there are some movies that are just straight gross. There's nothing scary about it necessarily, but they have to be classified as horror because it's gory or whatever.
Yeah, I guess so. I really feel like there should be just distinct categories, which over time you have to change the way that movies are made. Like if you think about a film from the 1950s, like the way that they made film back then was literally on film. Versus what they have out now is what they were making movies about back then is so different from what they're making movies about now. Like during the time of Exorcist, that was the scariest thing that people had ever seen at that time. And I don't know, it's such an interesting thing just to have all of these categories of comedy, horror, and this wide spectrum.
What is Alfred Hitchcock then?
Suspense.
Well, what happened to those? Like, I'm not trying to get to anything. I'm just trying to think of like
what happened to suspense.
Yeah, suspense thrillers, like things like Psycho.
They all changed into shit with killers, like real killers trying to
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
No, not Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I'm trying to think of a good film. Pretty sure everyone's thinking of a film that they would classify as suspense. It's like, oh, you don't know where kind of like Silence of the Lamb. Like you don't know where the killer is going to next, but you have to follow all of these clues. So it turned into a lot of these like cop versus bad guy or detective versus bad guy, like the movie Seven. Like that's where all of the suspense went into those types of films where it's always detective against serial killer, when it used to be something different. Like you mentioned Psycho, which it's still, you know, about a serial killer, but the way that it's presented has just become so different.
What about something like Last House on the Left? Because I mean, that's not necessarily horror either, but it has lots of gruesome imagery.
Would you think it would be in the same category as what's the movie with the guy in the house and Amityville? Is that Amityville?
Amityville's a horror movie, or I'm sorry, it's where the house is haunted.
Is that where the guy murders his entire family?
No, that's The Shining.
No. Okay, we're talking about a lot of these films have the same recurring theme.
This is where we're not psychically linked.
The Shining isn't. No, that was last episode. Or was it this one? It was this one. Lost it already. Okay, so The Shining, what would you categorize that as?
I don't know. It's kind of horror because I have nowhere else to put it on. Because I guess it would be. It's just that last thrilling like 20 minutes where it's like they're really like on the run, and there's only one death in the movie, which I find interesting. Well, technically two because Jack Nicholson kind of freezes, but it's the poor old guy who has the sex house and the amazing chair. And Jack Nicholson, spoiler alert, because he freezes outside.
No, you don't put a spoiler alert. That's so old.
Yeah, you've had time to see this movie. Remove the spoiler alert sound.
Yeah, remove it.
But yeah, it definitely has horror elements, especially the room 237 scene.
Yeah, now that has elements of gore and horror and suspense, I would say, because.
But you can't classify it as all three of those things.
Exactly, so it goes into horror.
You know what I think is also a problem? I think we also grew up in the blockbuster age or the Hollywood video age where we had specific categories that we needed to like walk
the
by.
Horror section.
Yeah, we need to actually.
Is that
like,
the problem?
Yeah,
that may be it. It's
like we're
I
just
know
trained.
This is horror because it's in the.
It's in that section.
Yeah, it's in the horror section. Maybe.
I think we just grew up in that, and then like nowadays, like kids are just on Netflix and they're like, whatever. This is
possibly
whatever crappy algorithm that Netflix had created.
Maybe, but I definitely stand by the thought that I have that films back then were just horror films, especially, were just a lot better than the horror films today. And I don't know if it's just because I'm used to certain things like monsters, or they're actually being. And no, I would say like ghosts and shit can be scary too. But now today they just seem so much softer. Like horror films today just really are not that scary. They seem very dumbed down, or comedy is added to it, or they just don't have that raw, like shit your pants, have nightmares at night kind of feel to it for me.
What are you looking for in a horror movie?
I want to, when I turn off the lights, have a bit of fear, but in the actual movie itself, man, I don't think I want to stay with one particular thing, but I guess there has to be something that is causing the horror, which doesn't, because that can, I'm not making any sense, because that could go into the films of today, like It Follows. There was actually something that was there that was the scary thing, but it was, it was passed on through sex. So now it's kind of funny because you're looking at it as an STD of some kind. Like this thing is now an STD versus the films back then where you take something like, let's just go with Freddy Krueger and Jason. Like they were actually, I was more afraid of Freddy Krueger than Jason because it seemed more plausible that Freddy Krueger, you're not protected in your dream. It's like Jason, you just get in the car and you move away, but Freddy Krueger, he's gonna continuously come after you, or Pinhead and the Cenobites, they can just cross through the different dimension, like they can find you anywhere versus, like a serial killer, you just move away, or like Jason, you just move away, a ghost in a house, you just sell the house and just go to a different house.
So it made Friday the 13th Part 2 interesting is because I think that's one of the few spots, aside from Jason Takes Manhattan, where Jason actually leaves Camp Crystal Lake to hunt down that lady in the apartment in the first scene. And it's just, I find that interesting because that means he had to get a taxi or like steal a car, either we're admitting Jason can drive. But anyways, like that whole idea of, can this thing actually come to real life and attack you is what you want.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is the most recent scary movie that actually had that effect on you?
It's going to be a long silence as I think about this.
Note to self, keep this in.
No, don't keep this in. It's going to be so much dead air.
Isn't that horror? Dead air.
No, but I would say probably Ouija.
Didn't we just make fun of that movie?
We did. But the thought of it.
Parker Brothers.
Yeah.
Or
Milton Bradley. But the thought of it as there being an entity that can cross dimension and harbor itself into your body. I mean, there has been plenty of films that have done this. You know, The Exorcist, you know, all of the versions of The Exorcist, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, you know, like all of these versions, there is something that takes over your body or a person's body and makes them, you know, like kill people and come after you or do damaging things. So Ouija is just a more recent one that I've seen. You know, there have been others in the past, but yeah, Ouija. So some shit that can still come after you or be with you, and sometimes you may not even know that it's there because so just the thought of me feeling like, oh shit, you know, like this person's acting weird. What if they're possessed? You know, like just probably also making up my own thoughts and synopsises of what else could happen because of this entity that can now possess people. So I think more thinking about it afterward gives it more of a scary element to it.
I have a British horror movie to recommend to you, and I'll have to do this later, put in the liner notes because I can't remember the title of the movie.
Okay.
But it actually stars Lena Headey, who's Cersei from Game of Thrones.
She was also the queen in 300.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So she was in this horror movie, and it has to deal with like the mirror universe, sort of, but it's all like really interesting and kind of subtle how it does it. Yeah. It's kind of confusing to watch it, but you kind of start seeing these like weird things and you don't know who's crossing over into what, and like there's like all these like really creepy elements that's like completely unexplained.
Yeah, that shit would scare me.
Yeah, like, and that's actually kind of, I would say that's probably the most recent horror movie that I've seen that has freaked me out a little bit, just because I kind of already have an uneasiness staring at myself in the mirror, and to know that this thing is a possibility. Yeah, like, so I just think mirrors, there's like something just ingrained that's like kind of freaky about them, because even in voodoo culture, like when it's like thunderstorming, you're told to put cloths over the mirrors.
Oh really? I didn't know that.
So there's all these like really interesting things, especially in your bathroom, which is a horror movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
so things like that would be terrifying to me because, you know, if you're home by yourself, you're like, oh shit, you look down the hall and the bathroom lights is flickering, or you know, the breeze catches the door and it starts to move, you're like, oh shit, something came through the mirror. So it's like something that can continue to come after you versus, you know, you knowing, Jason's that you? Come on.
Yeah, part of our horror bingo is jump scare, but it's a cat.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's part of our,
that's
one of the horror bingo things that we have. I think another one is head trauma or nut trauma. Like there, and that one surprised us the most because we didn't realize how often Jason kind of gets hit in the nuts every so often and falls.
Oh wow. That must
it's
have
happened
come
like
later.
Twice.
That must have come later.
No, it was kind of early on when they made him more human.
So that's what I'm saying, like later on, once they kind of changed him up a little bit, because once they get past the first film of establishing this.
Well, the first film, they didn't have him.
Jason?
Yeah. I mean, he was a little kid zombie at the end of the movie. Spoiler alert.
Oh, maybe I gotta go back and rewatch it.
So you don't remember the first movie?
Jason?
Friday the 13th.
No, not right now.
Okay.
I only remember Halloween, the first movie of the Halloween series. I always talk about Hellraiser. So Hellraiser, Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play. Well, I actually remember several of those, but yeah. So Jason's the one that I was just never scared of Jason.
For me,
Mike Myers is kind of similar to me. It's kind of similar
the
to
love
Jason.
guru.
Well, Or, it's the whole white mask and going around and killing people and,
Well, what's interesting is that the first one's, it's the same thing. Like, it's more on the thriller side of horror because it's actually the Halloween movie is such a stalker film. Like, it's such a creepy vibe and everything like that.
Yeah. Like, if I wanted to watch a thriller, I'd watch that.
Yeah.
It's not really scary for me.
But for me, like, the Jason movies aren't necessarily about horror so much. And this is kind of what I want from a more recent horror movie. I'm not actually looking to be scared.
Like slapstick
I'm actually
comedy.
just looking for fun.
Okay.
Like, because
see, and that like proves my point that horror has changed so much throughout the years.
But nothing has been fun lately. Like, it's always been fun in the 80s. Like, even though it's a terrifying experience, like Freddy Krueger is still gonna
scared.
Freddy Krueger is still gonna crack jokes. Like, he's
all the time.
Yeah.
That was scary too.
Was
it's
it?
like it's like
I'm now in your pizza.
Yeah, it's like you're a monster. It's like making jokes. Like you're that self-aware that like
I'm a cockroach now.
Yeah, like you want to be funny. Like that's scary as shit.
I don't know.
Kill me,
I'd be so confused.
Just kill me.
Apparently, there's a script floating around of like somebody was going to make a prequel to Nightmare on Elm Street, wherein they focused on the child predator that he was when he was alive.
Oh, then it's just going to be like a thriller or a drama.
Yeah. And then it has to end in the most climactic way possible, which is the townsfolk just set him on fire.
Still a drama. Still.
That's not a drama.
It is a drama. They're like, oh, you're taking our kids. So dramatic. He's like, I know, I just got this problem.
It's still a thriller because, no. Well, maybe.
Totally
I don't know.
a drama.
I haven't read the scripts.
Totally a drama. But
Possible.
I hope they don't make it.
No, I think it was definitely shelved, but I think a leak did appear, like a pitch.
They've already rebooted at least the first one. Or not necessarily. Well, they remade the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I saw it, it was like, well, I prefer the original. They made it make a little bit too much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like the burns were a little bit more accurate, which is fine, but I mean it just didn't really add anything.
I'm not looking for accuracy in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
Accuracy, I don't know, like horror, you can kind of cross many lines into wherever you want to go, but if they just remade it to make it look more accurate, like accurate burns and things like that, or they fleshed out the story a little bit of why he was a child predator. I mean,
like, I don't need this backstory. Yeah.
It doesn't
like
add
when
anything.
when they remade Friday the 13th, they made Jason like some master tactician who was digging holes and tunnels underneath the camp, and I was just like,
that's too much.
Yeah, what are you doing? I think you missed the whole point of what made that whole series fun and interesting to watch. Because I'll say it, like even Jason X, like the later versions of it, are totally, it's a complete satire at that point.
Yeah.
Where they're making,
I hate
they're not
it so
trying
much.
to be, but they're not trying to be, what I like is that they're not trying to be horror in the sense, like they know, they're fully well aware.
That's what I dislike, of where you take a perfectly good horror film.
You didn't like Jason to begin with, so I don't know what your problem is.
I don't even remember it, but I'm still upset that you take a perfectly good horror film and then you just change the whole meaning of it.
I like the
throughout
fantastical.
The series.
I like the fantastical. Like let's freeze Jason and he's in the future in space.
No.
Oh my god, that was amazing.
I hate it so much. And they did the same thing with Child's Play. It's like they made Chucky, more humorous. Like he cracked more jokes. Like everything was more
that I don't
lighthearted.
I didn't really
just like stab and cut a bitch and slit her throat and like stab the guy.
But those are like hilarious fun. Like not hilarious.
It's fun to be scared.
Yeah.
But not funny for me. So I like it. I do like the sensation that I get whenever I am afraid of something. It's like, I don't know, endorphins are released or some shit. It's like, oh, I'm so scared. Oh, this is so much fun. Kind of like when you go to one of those places,
those
like
haunted houses.
Yeah, like a haunted house where it's very linear. You're following behind a person and they pop out. You go there because you want to be scared because it's fun to be scared. But when you're in that moment, you're not. Well, I'm not. Laughing and things. Like I'm still screaming. But at the end, it's like, woo! I was screaming and I peed a little. That was so fun.
So there's this amazing Nathan For You sketch where he's like, I don't think horror or haunted houses are that scary. So he made his own haunted house. And so halfway through, what he does is he takes you aside and is like, I'm sorry, something crazy just happened. We have to take you over to here. I think we accidentally exposed you to the person who accidentally touched you, because they're not supposed to touch people, but somebody accidentally touched they get somebody to accidentally touch them. And they're like, oh, they accidentally touched you, and that person had, I'm sorry, just Ebola, and like it still could be contagious. And so he would freak this person out, like, I have Ebola maybe? And he's like, yeah. And then they have to take him on this ambulance ride, and they go driving around, and then they exit out, and it's like, surprise, you don't have Ebola. Like, it was for the haunted house. Are you scared? Yeah, I'm scared. I'm about to sue you, right? Because they were like, oh, maybe you want to call somebody.
Perfect. Yeah. Scare me like that.
Yeah. Like,
that's how I want to be scared. And then I will remember it forever.
Speaking of forever, that's the end of the show.
What? That doesn't make any sense. Okay. All right. Goodbye, then.
Bye. So don't forget to like and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And we're on Twitter at Uncouth Tangents. You can like us on Facebook, and we're on YouTube as well, where you can find our older episodes.